Yes, I'm Martin Phillips, the Deputy Governor of the Isle of Man Prison and Probation Service.
Obviously, we're speaking then today, obviously, about last Tuesday's morning's protest at the prison, where we know that several prisoners refused to leave the exercise yard and return to their cells, essentially. I suppose the to get straight into it, the first statement we had from the Department of Home Affairs said that the prison was dealing with a passive incident. The next said it was a peaceful protest. Would you still maintain that position now? I mean, was the protest peaceful in its entirety?
If I can just be clear about exactly what happened, really, and I think it's important just to be mindful of the fact that we are running a prison here, and this sort of situation is not uncommon. It's not expected, but it's not uncommon, and incidents like this are fairly normal in custodial settings. So effectively, 13 prisoners took part in what began as a small scale passive protest, and they were refusing to come in off the exercise yard after their period of exercise is finished and return to their cells. So as the incident progressed, some of the prisoners had caused some damages to benches that are on the yard for prisoners' comforts, and also damage to some of the windows. So to ensure the safety and protection for both staff and the prisoners, we deployed staff with their appropriate personal protective equipment and followed established protocols to draw a close to the situation.
So obviously some damages caused to the site then. Were you happy that it kind of all came to a safe conclusion, though, with regards to, your staff and the prisoners?
Yes, there was no injury reported through staff and prisoners. So yes, it was successful, a very professional conclusion to the incident, yes.
Was food, water and medication offered to prisoners throughout? Because we've heard that that wasn't the case. Indeed, we've been told that staff were concerned for one prisoner in particular during the incident because they weren't being given their medication.
Yeah, I can confirm that food, water and medication were offered to all the prisoners that were involved throughout the incident. I mean, that's a basic duty of care that we made sure was offered. We also had healthcare attend the scene for a period of time to assess the prisoners that were as part of the protest.
Well, so in terms of water, we've heard that the water to the lower floors of the prison was turned off because prisoners in those cells were attempting to funnel water out to the prisoners on the yard. Can we get a confirmation or a sort of denial of whether that was the case?
I'm aware that the water was turned off through one prisoner's cell. The rest of the prison was functioning as normal. It was just isolated to a single prisoner's cell.
We've established that there were some damages caused. We've been told by the police that this incident is being managed by the Isle of Man Prison Service and not by the Isle of Man Constabulary, so presumably no criminal charges have been levelled against the prisoners. But what's the status now of the inmates who took part?
Okay, the prisoners are currently under good order and discipline, so they're removed from normal association at present. And again, that is just for their safety, the prison safety, and to ensure that we are gaining compliance from the prisoners. Every act of damage or any act against indiscipline will be following our normal disciplinary process, and that is ongoing at present.
And we were told that this protest was primarily as a result of the amount of hours that prisoners are spending in their cells daily up at Jurby. So what is the current policy with regards to prisoners being allowed out of their cells daily? Is that determined by how many staff you have on shift at any given time?
Our aim, obviously, primarily is to ensure that we deliver a full routine and a normal routine for prisoners as often as we can. Obviously, the same as every occupation, we have occasionally members of staff who go sick unannounced, and that will cause disruption. We also have escorts that are required, medical escorts for prisoners to go out, which at times can take 2 or 3 members of staff out of our normal daily planning, which can again cause disruption, but we try to keep that disruption to a minimum.
So how many hours per day are prisoners spending in their cells on average at the moment?
It's too hard to quantify how many prisoners. Each individual prisoner will have different aspects of how their day would look. For example, a prisoner who is working in the kitchen will be out working in the kitchen all day, whether the wing that prisoner is from is subject to restrictions. So prisoners with jobs have got the opportunities the majority of time to continue with their jobs. So prisoners with off-wing work will be off the wing working, and we still try to provide all other services, so the prisoners will still have access to medication, they'll be fed, they will still have a period of exercise. visits, all those sort of activities will still go if the wing is closed down.
But we've been told by several sources now that, to take maybe the workforce out of it, that your sort of general population prisoner is spending up to about 23 hours, even 23 and a half, so 23 hours and 30 minutes in the cells every day. So they're maybe on the exercise yard, physically outside of their cells for about half an hour in any given day.
They're entitled to exercise, and exercise is managed for prisoners. Prisoners will still receive the medication in the morning, which is a period of unlock. Gymnasium is still facilitated when it can be facilitated. But prisoners will not be general population prisoners are not subject to 23 and a half hours of in-cell activities, no.
When prisoners are discussing the fact that they are in cells for a long amount of time, I mean, obviously we see comments on these stories where people sort of say, they're in prison for a reason, it's punishment, and so on and so forth. But if they're spending the majority of their time essentially in a room, do you see why prisoners may be then to the point where they want to protest that?
I absolutely understand, how frustrating it can be. Our intention throughout the prison is to run a regime and a routine that prisoners can enjoy on a daily basis, which should give outside activities for prisoners or out of cell activities for prisoners. That is always our aim. It's a last resort to close wings. But again, as I've stated, for operational reasons, there are times and occasions when that will need to happen.
Okay, so then in terms of operational reasons, was this protest then as a result of the required staffing levels to maintain the prison environment not being met? So essentially, not enough staff are employed at the prison at the moment to facilitate prisoners being out of their cells for longer than potentially half an hour a day?
That's not the case, no. Initial reports came through to the command suite to state that the prisoners were unhappy about the time out of cell. They were all unhappy as well about, there was a reported issue about the water being discoloured on one of the wings. But as the situation progressed, there was lots of personal issues that came out for individuals, which again can be addressed and is addressed by staff. We also have internal processes that we expect prisoners to follow with regards to any complaints they have. And we take their complaints obviously seriously, because something that may seem trivial to a member of staff or a member of the public is massive to a prisoner. If a prisoner is suffering any hardship, it's absolutely compounded by being in prison, and we're aware of that. So we take all their complaints seriously and deal with them with internal processes.
So can you confirm then, I suppose, at the base level, how many prison officers you employ at the prison and the sort of details of the staffing levels required then to be able to maintain the prison?
I can't go into staffing levels required. Some of that is around the aspect of security. However, there have been multiple freedom of informations with regards to staffing levels, and that information is public knowledge that any listener that wants to know what sort of staffing levels we have can access that through government websites.
So it's funny you mention that. So on Manx Radio's Man in Line programme on the 23rd of July, Andy Wint asked the prison governor, Leroy Bonnick, I'll just directly quote this here, we've done a very sketchy pen portrait of that, but how many prison officers do you employ here? To which Mr Bonnick responded, we employ 42 officers, but that's gone up by another 6 in terms of the population pressure to be able to unlock each day. So presumably the answer to my question there is, 42, maybe 48 prison officers. Now, just as an easy point of comparison here, according to a Freedom of Information request response, back in 2022, the average number of prison officers employed was 81. So basically, we now have half of that. So again, I'll ask, was this protest caused by the fact that prisoners are spending up to 23 hours a day plus in their cells, and that this is as a result of your current staffing levels?
Yeah, the number 42 was potentially a misquote. 42 or 40 prison officers, as you state, is what's used in the residential. We have multiple officers throughout different departments. So operations will have 10 officers. We'll have the resettlement team, which will also have 6 to 10 officers. We have gymnasium staff, work staff. So there's multiple staff around the estate that we do utilise. Every member of staff in the prison that has a specialist role will also be primarily a prison officer.
You're doing a very good job here of not answering my question, in that the main concern that's being raised to everyone who's spoken to me is that the current staffing levels and the amount of time prisoners are spending in their cells is what's caused this unrest. And so I appreciate your position of not being necessarily able to respond to that on a security level, but it's kind of a yes/no answer if that is the reason for this protest.
As I said, it's not in its entirety, no. That was the initial call that came through to the command suite. However, lots of other issues were brought from individual prisoners that they felt as though they hadn't been addressed, which are since being addressed.
Okay, what's your response then to the fact that we've been told that staff at the prison feel underappreciated?
I can't really comment on that without chatting to other individual members of staff. But what I can say is that the staff did a fantastic job. A lot of the staff that we used on the incident were called in off rest days, off annual leave. They volunteered themselves from other departments to ensure that we had the resilience to deal with the situation. So I can't thank staff enough for what they did and how they did it in such a professional manner. It made us proud and demonstrated what we can do when we need to do it.
In terms of bringing this incident under control, was parva spray used on inmates as a resource? And in doing so, were correct procedures followed in using it? So, amongst other things, we're told that prisoners weren't offered medical attention afterwards, and that we've heard reports they were stripped naked and thrown into segregation cells and then weren't able to shower until Thursday.
Okay, I can't go into tactics that were utilised to ensure the yard was cleared, but what I can state that if parva was used, and the fact that it was used in correct procedures that we follow for control and restraint, prisoners are automatically taken back into segregation because, again, there's a risk that we need to try and assess as to whether a prisoner can go back to normal location. Prisoners will be searched in those locations. And every prisoner was seen by healthcare after the incident, and also food was provided to prisoners after the incident.
Some people we've spoken to have called for an independent investigation into the general state of the site, saying that nothing has changed at the prison over the past few years, despite several high-profile incidents, including obviously deaths there. What would your response be to that? Would you welcome an independent inspection? Is one due or planned?
The prison has recently been inspected. We were inspected by the HMIP inspectorate team. We were also under inspection from the Prison Probation Ombudsman. We had some learning from the first HMIP report, which we then satisfied on a supplementary visit by the HMIP to address those concerns. So we are in a fairly good shape. With regards to the incident, we did have the Independent Monitoring Board present throughout the whole situation, who again are the overseers to make sure we are being fair and correct for prisoners.
Someone we spoke to said, quote, "It feels like a cover-up is taking place to protect the chief executive and the current prison management from genuine concerns raised by the protesters regarding the current state of the failing Isle of Man prison." What's your response to that?
Okay, there's no intention to cover any situation. We deal with refractory prisons potentially on a daily basis, and it's not something we go to the press about or sing and shout about. It's part of business as usual. So again, that's the reason, or one of the reasons, we haven't been public with information coming forward. And again, it's difficult to discuss tactics with regards to ensuring the safety and security of both staff and prisoners.
Thank you for making it to the end of the Manx Radio newscast. You are obviously someone with exquisite taste. May I politely suggest you might want to subscribe to this and a wide range of Manx Radio podcasts at your favourite podcast provider, so our best bits will magically appear on your smartphone. Thank you.